I managed to get the bridge completely wired. It took over 3 hours, perhaps closer to 4 hours, to get all of this in place. The enemy was not happy about this. They were trying to get my attention the whole time. 30 caliber messages going my way. And somehow, heaven knows how, they were never successful. At one point I was so exhausted, this was in the last channel on the upstream side, and I was crouched into this little opening I've described on all fours, and you push your body outward to gain the purchase on each side to hold yourself in place. I had roughly 3 maybe inches on the bottom of these flanges that my knees and hands would fit on. And on one occasion I actually passed out. I lost consciousness. I'm not sure for how long, a couple of seconds, maybe a half a minute. And I suddenly came back into consciousness, and I'm looking straight down at the river. The river's flowing underneath me. And I suddenly couldn't realize where I was. Where am I? Why am I here? What is happening? And then all the noise from the firing, and I regained it quickly where I was. A tank on the opposite bank, an enemy tank, fired a round, and this round hit outside of the beam that I was adjacent to, not directly opposite me, but a little behind me. And the angle that it hit the beam was so severe that the round skipped off and slammed into the bank behind me, very close to the end of the bridge there. Of course, if the angle had not been that steep, it would have penetrated, and the obvious, I wouldn't have been here. But that was another incredible bit of luck, which I always say, luck comes from faith. And in this example, over and over and over, you never lose your conscious stream of thought. You're so busy you don't dwell on that, but you never ever stop thinking about the here and now and the reality. In my case, I thought constantly about my family and the terrible, terrible things I would do if I were eventually lost, which was a very clear reality, and I thought for certain that I would never make it out of there. And I could not, I simply couldn't get that out of my mind. I was constantly thinking about my 3 very young children and my wife, and how my loss would affect them, and it was just more than you can imagine, the terrible feeling that represented. And yet, through this virtually continuous prayer, very simple, Jesus, Mary, get me there, get me there, and the rhythmic aspect of that, you would have to do it to understand it the way I'm describing it. But what a huge difference it made, and it was successful. And the success, I like to think, came from that very simple prayer. Later, without going into a lot of detail, the bridge was destroyed. The enemy was stopped. In fact, they had not planned on that. They had no contingency plan for not getting across that bridge, and they were stuck on the north bank. In fact, they were jammed up. Ford Air Controller Airborne flying over us, whom I communicated with later on that day, my call sign was Leatherneck, and he said, Leatherneck, you've got a parking lot of tanks from here all the way to the demilitarized zone. And so they began to, some ships offshore came very close aboard and managed to range me, which means they could reach me with their batteries, and they began to destroy these enemy tanks and the enemy never made it across, which was a phenomenal event, us stopping them there. But more importantly, they lost their momentum. They were able to cross the river upstream a week or so later, but not with enough force to make a difference. And the mere fact we had stopped them there, my battalion had stopped them there, they lost momentum. They weren't able to accomplish their mission. Their attack failed, and the wonderful result of that I like to talk about. The great military genius, he is called, in North Vietnam then, was Vo Nguyen Giap, General Giap, the hero of Dien Bien Phu, who beat the French, he and Ho Chi Minh, but he was the head of their military, and he was considered throughout the world as a military genius, having beat the French in 1954 at Dien Bien Phu. Well, when he couldn't get his army through Dong Ha, they fired him. And I would like, I reflect on that every now and then. The entire French army couldn't stop you, but one bloody Marine sure did.